If Madame Ombro had taken her plane to India in the 60s rather than America, she would have found filmmakers as radical as Oshima and Imamura, but even more modern and determined to challenge film language. The greatest Indian director of the late 50s and 60s was this man, Ritwik Ghatak, passionate, drunken, wildly talented. He inspired a generation of filmmakers, including this one, Mani Kaul. This scene in Ghatak's Ajantrik shows the first thing we notice about his movies, their heightened emotions. A little boy playing with a car horn. Lovely framing, natural light. Cut to a man in close-up, moved to tears because the horn is all that's left of his beloved old car, his taxi, his income that he had for decades. We see the realization on the man's face that life goes on, and at least the child is getting pleasure from the fragment of his car. A classic Indian melodrama.
But I couldn't reconcile with the melodrama of his work. Only slowly I understood, like at the end of his life, I think I began to understand what he did. And people don't realize that, I think, is that he opened that idea of melodrama to the pain of history.
Kaul means that Ghatak's melodramas weren't just about personal emotions. They were about the emotions of history. For Ghatak, the great emotion in recent Indian history was the partition of the country, in which 500,000 people died and 15 million were forced to move. He called it India's original sin. This film was about that original sin. We start with this splendid shot of a majestic avenue of trees as old as history, filmed at dawn. Our lead character, Nita, walks from them to us. She's from a refugee Bengali family, forced by partition to live on the outskirts of Calcutta. She tries to hold her family together. Cut to this shot. This is her ineffectual brother who just sits around and sings. But in the background of this brilliant widescreen composition, a train passes. As misty as the tree, beautiful in its way, but slicing through the horizon like a knife. Ghatak's visionary film showed the family sliced by history. And Ghatak wasn't only daring with the story, he was wildly experimental in his use of sound. Here he acts in Yukti Tako Agapo and distorts the sound as if the film is a sci-fi movie.
He was very impressed by the statement on sound made by Einstein, Podolkin, and who was the third one? That the counterpuntal use of sound, the counterpoint, As much as he was, inculcating in us a new kind of cinema, he was also very forcefully condemning, the commercial work and the kind of work that is just very degenerate and decadent for him.
In the mid-60s, Mani Kaul himself became a modernist filmmaker. This is his great experimental film, Uski Roti. The man's about to throw a stone at a guava in a tree to make it fall so that he can give it to his woman. But look at the way Mani Kaul paces the action. He throws 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Not exactly the rapid fall of Isaac Newton's apple.
I always felt that Godard was making films that are like faster than the time experience in normal life. And I needed to go slower than that, I just needed to go slower. Suppose there's a static guava on a static table and the camera is static, then the only thing that is functioning there is time. The moment there is a movement, that idea of time is alienated. So this whole idea of long take or evoking time or disjointed editing, actually coincides with the idea of waiting. And in waiting, of course, a whole world is created mentally, like as you wait, like you create a whole world. What is known as self in our philosophy, in a way, not as self is understood in psychology, is something that the mind cannot perceive, In the Upanishads and all, to which Ritwik Ghatak also referred in a different way, there is, the self is described as, it is suggested as indescribable, unreachable, unknowable, unavailable to senses. So it was never experienced, but it's always there. So this affects very deeply the question of art, that you really cannot make that self as a subject, of filmmaking. It is in fact the one who's making the film,
And Kaul's Indian idea that the person making the film is the subject of the film is the very definition of modernism.